He will not talk about it. I mean, he fucking hates it. He's a hardcore industrial guy. The fact that he ever did techno or dance music is just a black spot on his career. But Joe loves that album. Joe loved With Sympathy. Loved the first Ministry album. And so if you know anything in Chicago, Al Jourgensen still, works here. And there was a period of time where Al Jourgensen was showing up everywhere with his not bathed dreadlocks. He had a serious drug problem at times. He would drive up and down the street doing 90. He was just a prick. Al Jourgensen for a long period of time. And I think he still is a prick. But there are some notorious stories about what a gigantic prick Al Jourgensen is. And during this period of time, when Al Jourgensen, I guess, was a little bit more, seen more often, Joe was producing a record, a dance record, at this studio in Chicago. I can't remember what studio it was. And there were two different rooms in the studio, two recording studios. He was in one, and Al Jourgensen was booked to be in the other one. And Joe was like, "Hey, Al Jourgensen. Fucking Al Jourgensen is going to be working there." And he was telling me, hey, listen, Al Jourgensen is going to be in the other studio. So he was kind of excited about that. Oh, yeah. Even though, like, in his opinion, for a good 10, 15 years, Al Jourgensen was producing industrial garbage. A bunch of shit. That's a bunch of bullshit, the stuff he's doing. So he's there, and this is a true story. He's there, and they had, like, a common room, like a little lunch area with some vending machines and stuff. That everybody, if you're working in Studio A or Studio B, everybody had this little lunch break area, with vending machines and a fridge and all that shit. Break room. So Joe takes a break from this dance record he's producing, and he goes into the break room, and he's looking at the vending machine, and all of a sudden he looks, and here comes Al Jourgensen in all his glory. Smelly, probably hadn't changed his weird-ass clothes in like a week. Dreads, sunglasses, like all, the whole Al Jourgensen, look at me, I have dreads and I'm white and I'm a jagoff thing. He comes in, probably fucked up in some regard at this point. He walks in and Joe looks over and he sees him and he says, "Hey, Al Jourgensen." And Jourgensen just kind of looks over at him, Joe's like, "Hey, how's it going?" Whatever. And Joe goes, "Hey, listen, let me ask you a question. Hey, listen, what the fuck happened after that first album?" He said to Al Jourgensen's face, "What the fuck happened after that first album?" So Jourgensen just kind of like stops and looks at him and then spits at Joe. Like, spits at Joe. And Joe's like moves out of the way. He starts turning away and Joe goes, "Hey, listen, that's a little fucking rude." Then Jourgensen walks away. And Joe tells me this story and was like, "What the fuck's wrong with that guy?" And he didn't mean it, like, Joe did not mean it as, like, an insult, like, but he seriously was like, I think what he wanted to say was, "Hey, listen, why did you change direction with your music after With Sympathy?" But he said, "Hey, listen, what the fuck happened after that first album?" So, the Al Jourgensen story, he spit at Al Jourgensen, so, yeah. So that's one of my favorite stories ever, the Joe story ever. I'm trying to remember if there was anything else that I wanted to mention here. Yeah. So Jourgensen, he was there the whole, and Joe didn't see him again, but that was his only encounter with Al Jourgensen, whose album With Sympathy provided Joe with a lot of pleasure. So, but that was Joe. Hey, listen, he'd come in, he'd own the room, told great stories, always made people laugh, and he was just a great guy. He was a great guy. And I have many more Joe stories, but I think the Al Jourgensen one and the Oliver Stone one, those are my two favorite Joe celebrity encounters. And there were many more. On a personal level, he was just a great friend, was always there for you. And for a while there in the 80s and 90s, there were about 8 or 9 of us that were truly, truly tight. In the 80s especially, we used to meet at Dimitrio's, which was a diner/Euro restaurant on the corner of Montrose and Central, which is now a Walgreens. We used to hang out there pretty much every night. And Joe would hold court, Hey, listen, this is bullshit, was his favorite thing. He was a great guy. There are a lot more stories that I'm forgetting, but the celebrity encounter stuff is always only acting Mayor Eugene Sawyer. Ooh. So I just wanted to share a couple of those stories. I have many memories. Really quickly, Joe and I were bonded. We were really tight, even when we didn't talk as much. In the late '90s into the early mid 2000s, when we all sort of like kind of went different ways, and I ended up getting divorced, and Joe and Scott and like a lot of the other guys had kids and stuff like that. And they saw each other a little bit more frequently than I did. I didn't see Joe as much, but we were always bonded. And I'll never forget this. Years ago, Joe was in the hospital and he had mono. And I talked to him. He was in the hospital for a few days. And one night, and we'd always had this, we were always really, really close. From the first time we met at McDonald's, we were very, very, very close. Sort of unspoken. Even when we didn't talk to each other for weeks or months at a time, there was always an unspoken connection that Joe Donatello and I had right there. That is an unspoken connection right there. So I'll never forget this. Joe had mono. He was in the hospital. I believe this was the late 80s. And I had gotten off the phone with him. I talked to him, and he was a little bit groggy, and he was kind of out of it. And he was sick. He had mono and something else that they had to fix while he was in the hospital. And anyway, he was in the hospital for a week or so. So one night I'm asleep, and